In 1944, as Nazi Germany's defeat became inevitable, a group of high-ranking Nazis and industrialists allegedly gathered in secret at the Red House Hotel in Strasbourg, France. Among them were key figures from the Nazi regime, including SS officers, government officials, and powerful German businessmen. They convened to discuss what could be the most audacious plan ever devised by a regime on the brink of collapse, laying the groundwork for a Fourth Reich, a resurgence of Nazi power, not through military conquest, but through economic influence and global manipulation. The Red House conspiracy would suggest that Nazi elites foresaw the fall of the Third Reich and sought to regroup, with the aim of rebuilding a covert empire that would survive in the shadows. This meeting was reportedly organized by SS Obergruppenführer Dr. Scheid, under direct orders from Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler. The Nazi officials present purportedly discussed ways to preserve their wealth and influence by transferring assets to neutral countries like Switzerland, Argentina, and Spain. They envisioned a clandestine network that would allow them to regain power in the post-war world. The goal of this meeting, according to conspiracy theories, was to plan for the establishment of a Fourth Reich, a Nazi resurgence that would no longer rely on brute force or military expansion, but on stealth, economic control, and infiltration of key industries and governments. They sought to create a network of Nazi loyalists, businesses, and sympathizers who would spread their influence across Europe and the world, building a covert empire that could one day rival the Allied forces that had defeated them. The Nazis' dream of a Fourth Reich was not to be a carbon copy of the Third Reich. Instead, it was to be a more subtle, adaptable, and enduring vision of Nazi dominance, achieved not through tanks and planes, but through economic domination, covert influence, and political infiltration. They wanted to lay low, bide their time, and eventually rise again, stronger and smarter. By 1944, the Nazis were losing the war on all fronts. The Allies had landed in Normandy, the Soviets were pushing westward, and the Luftwaffe had lost control of the skies. Germany's economy was in shambles, its military stretched thin, and morale within the Nazi leadership was rapidly deteriorating. While the ambition of a Fourth Reich might have been appealing, the immediate situation demanded survival. The collapse of Nazi Germany was inevitable, and any attempt to establish a new Reich during the war's closing days would have been impossible. Instead, the conspirators supposedly understood that they needed to escape the fall of Berlin, avoid war crimes trials, and wait for the right moment to strike. They couldn't openly pursue their plans under the watchful eyes of the Allies, so they sought to scatter, hiding in plain sight while laying the groundwork for their return. According to the theory, after the Red House meeting, the Nazi officials and industrialists began transferring their wealth to neutral countries and setting up businesses that could serve as fronts for their future plans. It's alleged that vast amounts of Nazi gold were smuggled out of Germany and hidden in Swiss banks, while others were laundered through shadowy business ventures in South America, particularly in Argentina, a known refuge for fleeing Nazis after the war. Several high-ranking Nazis, including Adolf Eichmann and Josef Mengele, found sanctuary in South America, lending some credence to the idea that Nazi sympathizers had built a post-war network capable of supporting their escape. Companies with ties to the Nazi regime, such as IG Farben, reportedly remained powerful players in the post-war economy, and conspiracy theorists suggest that Nazi money was funneled through these corporations to keep the dream of a Fourth Reich alive. Despite their best efforts to smuggle money and hide key figures, the pursuit of a Fourth Reich faced numerous obstacles. The Allies were relentless in hunting down war criminals and dismantling the Nazi regime's infrastructure. The Nuremberg trials, held in 1945 and 1946, put many top Nazi officials on trial, with the most notorious figures either executed or imprisoned. Moreover, the world was not the same after World War II. The rise of the Cold War meant that global powers like the United States and the Soviet Union were now the dominant players, leaving little room for the resurgence of a Nazi empire. Even though some Nazis managed to escape justice, the overwhelming global sentiment was one of disgust and horror toward the atrocities committed by the regime, making an overt comeback nearly impossible. Nonetheless, the conspiracy theory holds that while the Nazis could not return immediately, they never abandoned their plans. Instead, they bided their time, using their wealth and influence to infiltrate new power structures in Europe and beyond. They sought to influence post-war economies, creating corporate and political footholds that might one day allow for the rebirth of their ideology. The Red House conspiracy has never been conclusively proven, but it continues to capture the imagination of historians, conspiracy theorists, and the public alike. Some point to the rise of far-right movements in Europe and the persistence of neo-Nazi groups as evidence that the legacy of Nazism has not truly been eradicated. Others believe that the Nazi conspirators who fled to South America succeeded in establishing a covert network that continues to exert influence today, albeit in a much more subtle and insidious way than the brute force tactics of the Third Reich. It is undeniable that many high-ranking Nazis managed to escape justice and lived out their lives in relative obscurity, far from the reach of the Nuremberg trials. Some, like Eichmann, were eventually caught and tried, while others, like Mengele, evaded capture until their deaths. The theory that a secret cabal of Nazis planned a Fourth Reich remains controversial, with many historians dismissing it as fiction, while others argue that there may be a grain of truth behind the conspiracy. The idea of a secret Nazi plot to establish a Fourth Reich is both fascinating and terrifying. It plays into broader fears about the resilience of totalitarian ideologies and the possibility that such evils could resurface when we least expect them. While there is no hard evidence to prove that the Red House meeting was a blueprint for a new Nazi empire, the fact that so many Nazis escaped justice and continued to live with their wealth intact raises troubling questions about the nature of power and the ease with which it can shift across borders. For those who believe in the Red House conspiracy, the specter of the Fourth Reich remains an ever-present danger, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. Whether this is true or simply another historical myth, the legacy of the Nazis continues to haunt us, reminding the world that the fight against tyranny and hatred is never truly over.